Hello and welcome back to 3S Game Studio. In this video, we will be presenting the inventory and equipment module of the new AGR plugin and go over its functionality so you can create your own easy to manage inventories quickly and easily. The project that you're seeing right now is made with AGR inventory module, and this project will also be available for you guys to download. In this version of AGR, the inventory and equipment are combined into a single component called AGR Inventory Component. It has custom serialization and is replicated for seamless multiplayer. To use the AGR inventory, you will also need the AGR item component, which will allow you to make any actor a inventory item. The AGR inventory and the AGR item component work hand in hand with each other. Now let's have a look at the AGR inventory component that you will most likely have in your character. In the details of the AGR inventory component, you will see inventory ID and owner ID. This corresponds to the ID of the inventory itself and then to the ID of its owner, in this case the character. These will be set up automatically and you do not have to worry about them, but we do have a custom event to override the owner ID to something that is custom, which can be your Steam ID or your unique net ID, or it can be any ID that you use to associate with your players. Next up, we have container default transform. This is the default transform of the container that actually contains all your items. It's a real world object that will contain all of your items and is linked to your AGR inventory. It is done in this way so it allows us to easily transfer our items from one inventory to another. And at last, we have the active equipment slot map. This is your equipment slots. Here we have a slot for a weapon and a shield, which you guys saw in use earlier in the video. You can only have one slot of a type. You cannot have two weapon slots, you cannot have two shield slots, and every slot can only have one object linked to it. Now, one thing to mention, in these predefined slots, your value should be always empty in the design view. If you set any reference to any object in the world here, you are gonna have issues when you play the game. We will be going over the functions on how to use these equipment slots and how you can get items from them. Now let's have a look at the other vital part of AGR inventory module, the AGR item component. It can make any actor it is added to a inventory or a equipment item. It is very extendable, meaning you can create subclasses of it, like I have done here in this example, to add more information to it, such as textures, descriptions, interactions, and so on and so forth. You just create a subclass of it and you add more variables to it. You can also add more code to it to do certain things. Like I have added interfaces to get textures and descriptions that I can use in my inventory UI. So in the AGM item settings, we have in the configurations we have three settings: item name, which is basically what you want to call your item. Then in item type, it is the tag of your item. Like we are using in our weapons, we are using item as weapon, shield, food, others. These allow you to filter your items a lot easier, like we are doing in our inventory. For example, I'm filtering them based on weapon, shield, armor, food, and others by simply just matching the tag to the item type. And then we have item tags, which are also very useful. This is basically an array. This is basically an array of names, and you can use them for a lot of things. Like I am using them here to set the value of the currency that when they're sold it will give us. You can also use them to add effects. You can use them to see if an item is of certain type, like is it an electric item or ice based item or whatever. You can use them in ammos to see what kind of ammo it is. You can add weights to it, and basically they work like your actor tags. The possibilities are endless for their uses. So now one important thing to note is when you add item tags here, they will be added to your actor's native tags too, so that you can access them from your actor. And next up we have stacking. So first of all, if you don't want your items to be stackable, you just turn it off. And if you want them to be stackable, you turn it on. You have stack count, which is the current count of items you have in this actor. For example, here I have set the book to a stack count of 3, and I'll also showcase how I'm using the item tags. And if I go and pick it up, I have I have a book of 3 stacks. And if I sell it, I get 300 coins, which is what I specified in its tags. Then we have max stack count, which is pretty self-explanatory again. Just the maximum number of items you can have in one stack before. And if you still try to add more items, it'll just create a new item in your inventory. Another part of the AGR inventory module is the AGR item interface, which gives you these couple of interfaces. If you have this interface implemented in your actor, that is a item, you can manage if you should be able to pick it up or equip it or drop it or unequip it. Once it is implemented, you have to make sure that it returns true if you want that certain action to happen. For example, here in the can it be equipped, I've made sure that I can only use this item as a equipment if it is a armor, a shield, or a weapon. You can add more functionalities here that suit your games. For example, you can have items that cannot be unequipped during a certain part of the mission, or you can have items that can never be dropped because they'll just return false, and once they do, you cannot drop that item. It is a very useful and very simple to use interface. Now let's go over the functions of AGR inventory component. We have a couple of functions for the AGR inventory. At first we have get all items. Now when you are searching for using any of these functions, they will search for your items under your container. They will search for items also under your equipments. They will also search items under your link to your player state and such. So they will give you, this one will give you all the items, this one will give you all the items of a specific name and whether it's case sensitive. Now you might remember I mentioned that this name has to be unique, and this is the reason why it has to be unique. This will give you all the items under that name. This will give you all the items of a certain tag. So again, very useful for filtering. Like I want all the armors in my inventory, and now I will only get all the armors in my inventory. And next we have get all items by tags. This will search for all the tags under this and find the items that match these tags. You have the option to match all of the tags, so that the items that it's going to provide you should have each and every tag that you mentioned in this array. Otherwise, it will provide you any item that even if it matches one single item of this array that you provided. And last of the get item functions, we have get all items by class. This is also very similar to all the other filtering get all items, but this one will filter based on your class. So I can get all the items that share this class, like the master item, or I can get all the items that share this class, the common currency, which is the master item for the all the currencies, or the master item which is master for every other item that there is. And then we have the interface events, which is very similar, which is basically the interfaces that we have implemented here that we explained earlier. The can be destroyed, can be equipped, dropped, picked up, or unequipped. I am using these interfaces to update my inventory so that I only get the options that are allowed to me. I am checking if the inventory can be equipped. If the item can be equipped, only then I will show the equip button. If it can be unequipped, only then I'll show the inequip button. If it can be used, only then I'll show the using buttons, and same goes for the dropped. And it makes sure that I do not have useless options here. So I only have eat and drop on my food, while I have equip and drop on my axe, because I don't want to eat my axe. And then we have the items, the functions for our stacking, which is adding to the stack, removing the stack, count all the stacks, and yeah, these are the ones. There is another function for stacks, which is to split the stack, but it is under the AGR item component, which we will go over later. So for the stacks, we have add stack. You specify the class. For example, it can be your currency. You want to add to your currency, you add how much more you should add to it. So like it's currently at 500, you set it to 100, and now your stack will be 600. And then we have remove stack. This is slightly different because it's, instead of taking a class, it takes an item. You make an array and you add your items that you want to add the stack to. Now one thing to note is that this function requires already filtered array that you can get from your inventory using the functions mentioned before. And it doesn't really care about the class name or anything. It'll just remove the stacks and destroy them. Plus it doesn't check if the number of stacks removed is greater than your items that you already have. So any checks for that needs to be done by the developer beforehand, like counting stack before removing, to make sure you have enough. Like for example, you will need it in your crafting scenarios. We are using this in certain items to remove the stack when we use that item. When you use an item, it does not automatically remove the stack. You will have to do this to remove the item when you use it, because not every item gets destroyed when it is used. And then we have count all the stacks, which also going to take an array, and it will give you the total amount of stack that you have. And next up we have the is item in inventory. Pretty straightforward, self-explanatory. You get an item and you see if its inventory matches the inventory that you're calling it from. Then we have calculate drop point. Now this is a very useful feature. It makes sure that you drop the item in front or at a certain distance, that like we are using here to drop the items. I'm dropping the item at about 100 units away, and it is dropped in the direction I am looking at. Like if I drop it here, it goes 100 units in this direction. If I drop it here, it's gonna get 100 units in this direction. It is very useful. It makes sure that you're not just dropping exactly where you're standing. Another thing to note is that calculate drop point function that you just saw, it can be overwritten. So if you make a custom inventory out of the AGR inventory, you can override this function to have your own dropping mechanism. And then we have does the slot exist. Now this one is for the equipment. It makes sure that it basically checks in this map if this slot actually exists or not. Now this feature is also checked before you equip an item. You do not have to do this check, but because if you don't have the slot for that, you equipping the weapon will just return a false and it won't be equipped. You will also get appropriate error from the print string that we have here, like error messages. All of the functions with these are, it's very handy for debugging. And next up we have the get all equipped items. Again, like this one gave you all the items, this will only give you the items that you currently have equipped in these slots. And then we have get item in slot, which will filter it down to a certain slot. So if I set it to weapon, I only get the weapon item that is currently equipped. If nothing is equipped, it's going to return empty. And then is item equipped is basically if this item is equipped in, then it will also give you the slots that that item is equipped in. Now let's have a look at the event dispatchers of AGR inventory. We have on equipment slot updated and we have on item updated. The item updated is called, as the name suggests, every single time, whether you add a new item, whether you're updating the stack, whether you're dropping the item, whether you're equipping the item, this one is called. I am using this to update my inventory. This only gives you the item that is updated and the type of update you have, which is a couple of options: picked up, updated, used, equipped, unequipped, or destroyed. In my inventory, I am using this to just add a update a certain slot with that item instead of recreating all of the inventory all over again, even when a single item is updated. Pretty useful. Again, if you want to see how this inventory is working, this project is going to be available to you and you can break it down to see how the things are working. And again, the functions and the dispatches with the lightning bolt are only called on server, must be called on server, and you will have to manage your RPC calls yourself. Now that was the item updated. The equipment slot updated is similar, but it works for equipment slots. So it will give you the item that the equipment that was so it will give you the item that interacted with the certain equipment slot, what sort of action happened, which is was it set or was it cleared, which is basically was it equipped or unequipped, and the slot that it happened on. I am using this event to update the slots. I'm using this event to update the preview character that you saw in the UI, and you can also use it to update your UI, but in which is kind of what I'm doing, but just in a unconventional method. Next up, let's look at the functions of the AGR item component. We have a use item, which you can define certain actions, what inventory is calling it. You can define actions and you can use the action type to see whether it's being used to craft, eat, or sell. Like we are using it for eating and selling, and we are filtering by the action type. Then we have unequip item, which is basically you tell it to unequip from a certain slot. A same item can be equipped on multiple slots, so that's why we have to specify what slot we want to remove that item from. We have destroy item. Destroy item makes sure that this event item, this dispatcher on item destroy, is called before the item is actually destroyed, so that you can use it to remove any effects that it was having on your character and other changes. And then we have pickup item, which again you need to specify what inventory is going to pick it up. You can specify whether it should hide the item when it is picked up, and whether it should add to the existing stack, and whether we want to force update its ID to the new inventory ID. Now you might be wondering, hide on pickup, is the AGR inventory item automatically managing the visibility of your items? And yes, it is. And it is also replicating that. So, and not only that, it is also replicating whether you should have physics on or whether you should not have physics on. For example, in my items, I have set them to I have set them to simulate physics. I don't know why it was turned off. I think I turned it off during making of the tutorial. Anyways, if I have a certain item set to simulate physics, the component will remember whether it was simulating physics or not, and when you pick up the item it will disable it, but when you drop the item it will re-enable it. So yeah, it's pretty handy to add physics based items. Then we have drop item, which is going to drop the item at a certain location and rotation. This is gonna go hand in hand with the function I showcased before, the calculate drop transform, and it also has the option to clear owner ID. If you don't clear the owner ID, the item will remember its last owner, which means that the dropped items on the ground will already have an owner, which you can use to create interesting game mechanics like stealing the items and facing the consequences because you're interacting with an item that already has an owner. And you can use the interfaces that we showed before for creating such interactions. And then we have equip item, which is what slot you want to equip it in and whether the item should become visible or not when you equip it. And then we have set simulation state, which is the function that manages whether your item should be visible or simulating physics. This is handled internally when you use these functions, but you can use it yourself too if for example, you want the item to become visible when you use a certain action or something. You can use this function. And then we have split stack, which will create a new item with by splitting the stack. So you have your item has a stack of 100, you can split it into 50-50, you can split it into 40-60, and if a stack that you're trying to split is not possible, you will get the proper error message and everything. And again, lightning, all of these must be called on server, so if you need to call them from your client, you will have to manage your RPC calls. And then we have our event dispatchers for the items. These, if you look at them, you will find them very similar to the function we just explained before, because they are, whenever the item is equipped, this will be called and it will give you the equipment slot that it was equipped on. Same goes for the unequipped, but it will only be called when you unequip an item and it will give you the slot it was unequipped on. Same goes, and then we have picked up item, which will give you the inventory that picked up the item. We have changed visibility, which will tell you the new visibility and physics state for the item. On item destroyed, this is called 1 frame before the item is destroyed, so you can undo the changes that this item did. And then we also have item dropped, which is going to give you a drop location and the inventory that dropped this item. And we also have item used, which I already explained and showcased how we are using for eating and selling the item. Now I will go over the showcase and how we are doing some things in the showcase. So in the showcase, we are actually doing a multi-sphere trace to pick up the items. We are checking the nearest item and we are checking if that item can be picked up. Now this is important because I do not want to be able to pick up an item that another player is holding or equipping or wearing. And how do I manage that? I am using the interface can item be picked up, and I'm making sure that it can only be picked up if the item does not have inventory linked to it. Now in this case scenario, I'm calling this on the client because I want to see if I can interact it on the local client for UI purposes. But this interface is also called on the server, so you do not have to call it from the client, as that authentication is already being done by your component. And yeah, basically we save the item that we are interacting with. I'm also updating the hood to show the little UI that shows which item we are interacting with, food, ball, book, or what X we are interacting with. And then to pick up the item, we are using the pickup item, and of course I do not want that item to be visible because it's in my inventory. I'm not equipping it. And then we are also a custom interface I made for this example, which is add currency. How are we using this, you might ask? We are using it, it's pretty simple. I'm just searching for the item tags. I'm searching whether it's a common or a diamond item, because I have two type of currencies in this example. And then I just call add currency, and what it basically does is it calls this interface, and then it just adds to the stack of my currency. If I do not have a currency available of any type in my character, then I will spawn that actor of that currency and pick it up and then add the stack. And then I am using the RPC call to update it on my inventory. And we also have server interactions. Now in the server interactions, I'm calling the item events that I showed you before, the dropping the item. Here I'm just calculating the drop point, adding a little bit of an offset so it's a bit higher and not lower, closer to the ground. Clearing the owner ID so another player can pick it up easily. And then I'm using the equip item to equip certain items. Now I'm calling this from the UI, this event. And how am I doing that, you might be thinking? In my interaction menu, I'm basically calling the interface that again I've made custom for this showcase to pass a certain task. The task is a tag, and I am using that tag to see whether I'm using it. If I am using it, I call the use thingy, the use interface. I call the use event on the item and pass the action as is. And if it's not a use, I'm going to call equip, unequip, and drop, as I explained before. Now there is another custom event here, which is equipment slot. Now this is how I have expanded my inventory by adding custom slots to it. Like we have some custom blueprints. Now we have some custom variables here that you won't have in your inventory. This is what I have expanded my inventory to include. And what it basically does is, and setting what slot a certain item can be equipped to. And that way I can know that a weapon needs to go in the weapon slot, a shield needs to go in the shield slot. You can also just use your item type for that, but I found that this method a bit more convenient for my use case. And that explains the interactions. Then we have the item updated, which I explained before. It's just basically to update my inventory. And that concludes all of the features and events and the dispatchers. There are a lot of other helper features and functions that you can use, and they are in the documentation linked on the marketplace. Now all of this that you saw is working on multiplayer even in this showcase, which I'm going to show. Why not? And I'm gonna play it as so you can see it side by side. Okay, so let's see if it's working on multiplayer. I'm gonna go to the client side and I'm gonna just damage my character a bit. And okay, picking up the sword. I can equip it, it works. Don't mind the UI, it's not supposed to be working on this resolution. Anyways, I can equip the UI, equip the sword. I can drop the sword. Physics working very fine. Well, sometimes you just don't have your collisions boxes set up very nicely, and this is what happens then. I really like that sword. See, it didn't happen. It wasn't my fault. Okay, we'll use the secondary nice sword, and I can also equip the other shields. And as you can see, all of these are being updated in the inventory on the client side, and they're working very fine. I can also sell and eat items. I'm getting more health, and if I sell, I'm getting more money, and now I'm rich. And that concludes our showcase slash tutorial slash documentation of inventory module. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions, feel free to drop in on our Discord and ask me the questions there. I am WaferX there, and you can also ask the question from a lot of helpful pro game developers there. And with that, I will conclude this video and see you again in the AGR project module video.